We're going to stop the share. Oh, so welcome everyone. I'm Joseph White, and I'm the interviewer for this evening. And welcome to A Life in the Arts, where we talk with interesting people who are living wonderful lives in the arts. And this evening, our guest is Dorothy Darlington, who is an oboist and also plays two other instruments, which she'll talk about. And what I'd like to do before we kind of get started here, I'm going to hand you over to Todd Whitley, who's the executive director of the Masterwork Music and Arts Foundation, and he'll tell you about who we are and what we do.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. The Masterwork Music and Art Foundation has been supporting excellence in the arts for over 50 years. 100% of your donation goes to fund art and artists through community grants, competitive awards, and a premier award for an emerging artist. You can find out more on our website, masterworkarts.org, or follow us on Facebook. I want to say that currently we're accepting applications for our next premier award, and that will be an organ performance. We also, in addition to this Zoom series, offer virtual dance classes, and everyone's welcome to participate in them. Thanks, Joe. And thank you, Dorothy, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Todd.
So, why of all things the oboe? It does have a reputation of not being the easiest. And I do know that people who are oboists spend an awful lot of time carving and adjusting reeds. So, but what had you come there?
Well, I have to admit, I did play some piano, but the piano was in the living room growing up. And when we moved from New York to Lake Placid, I was, in 5th grade, I think, and I was given a New York State musical aptitude test, and I scored very high on it. And I didn't really know what the different instruments were. So I think I wanted to play French horn. That's what I thought I was. But, they asked me if I play the oboe, not knowing what it was really. So they called me in, and it came in this little box, and the guy showed me how to soak up the reed, and here's a fingering chart, and come back in a week and play me a scale. Now I will admit to you, I've done a lot of teaching. I have never had a student come in after a week and attempt a C major scale. But, I seem to grasp that pretty well right off the bat. It sounded horrible, but, and I didn't have a very good instrument, but, I do have the persistence to hang in there. And I don't know, it intrigued me because it was small, and you were kind of special because you were always the only oboe in band, which meant nobody else knew what you were doing either for a while. But, as luck would have it, there was a very good oboe teacher who was there in the summer. His name is Robert Sprankle. And so I studied with him for 6 summers before I went to Eastman. So I did have some real help. He wasn't the best with beginners, but then I went to Crane a little bit in the winters. I would drive over there and have a private lesson every once in a while when I could drive at 16. And wild drive over there. Almost nothing. Once you get out of Saranac Lake, you're in the mountains on a desolate road. So luckily my car never broke down. But I got into Eastman. I went to Interlochen my senior year because my parents actually didn't like music, and they thought that Interlochen would cure me of this desire to play music. And so I knew how far behind I was at that point. I worked like mad and got into Eastman, and still had to work very hard for 4 years because I really didn't have the training that a lot of the other students had had. But when I did my senior recital, my teacher came back and started screaming at me and said, "Wow, why didn't you play like that for me ever before?" So I guess that was okay. And I had a professional job when I left Eastman, which was even in those days hard to do. It's much harder now. So I played in the, I joined the Peace Corps. I had auditioned for the orchestra and taught solfege and played in the National Symphony of Costa Rica for a year and a half. And that was very interesting. It was at the height of women's lib. So it was tricky. The music was great. We had a 10-month season and I got to play a lot of repertoire. And after a while, the first oboe left. So then I had to play first oboe and English horn. And it was very interesting. And so I did apply to get a master's after that because I wasn't sure I wanted to spend the rest of my life in Latin America. Because, you know, it was tough. The culture was tough for me, you know, in the late 70s. So I went to Michigan State, and then from there I went to Savannah and played in the orchestra there for 2 years, and then won the Jacksonville audition. And you know, each one was a better season, and I did a lot of music festivals in summer. In fact, I toured for 6 months with a barge band, and that was very interesting. I have a lot of stories about that. We went from Pittsburgh all the way out to Omaha, and then we ended in Brownsville, Texas, and I had to drive the van back to Pittsburgh. Lots of stories. And then, so I went to Savannah and Jacksonville, and then I auditioned for the Marine Band, and I won the Marine Band audition. So I played at the White House for 6 years, and those tours were even more involved than any of the other tours I'd done. And the freelancing was just wonderful when I got out in '87, right before the stock market crash. So, you know, at that point, after the crash and everything, I went and got a real estate license, which I still do. So I play a lot of music, but music typically doesn't really pay that well. And I do the real estate, and they seem to work very well together, actually. And then after the Washington experience, I was starting to freelance in New York, and I wound up being one of the subs for the New York Philharmonic for 10 years. And that was pretty exciting. So, you know, and I played in the Ridgefield Symphony for, I think, probably 30 years. And I had the opportunity to do the Strauss Concerto with Jerry Steichen maybe 10 years ago. And that was, I felt like that was one of the best performances I've ever done. So that's sort of about me. And I got a doctorate when I was in Washington at Catholic University. So anyway, what else would you like to know?
Well, one of the things is that you actually play 3 instruments, and 2 of them, I think, well, if you've heard the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra with narration, you know about 2 of them. But the third
there's
one,
only one used in that. There's only oboe used in that. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 oboes, but it's only oboe.
Right. So no English horn in that.
No English horn. He didn't know what he was missing, even though he was English.
Yes. Well, but it's also called the cor anglais, so you know it's
right. Now, do you know why it's called cor anglais?
No.
It's actually a pun. It's actually, you know, I always figured maybe the French thought the English were bent, right?
Okay.
And so it means bent horn. And originally it was because it didn't really have any keys, and they bent the wood so that you could get to the keys, get to the holes, because the wood was bent. It was just easier to finger it. We do have extensions on them now, so you have a normal hand position, and it closes the holes. And I will show you that. And oboe d'amore has a little bit of that. Oboe, you are actually, your finger is covering the hole that you're covering for the most part, except for where the keys are. And the oboe is actually the last, the oboe and English horn and oboe d'amore were the last woodwinds that were really finely developed. Maybe the key system was codified maybe in the 1870s by a gentleman named Tree Bear, because Boehm had worked on the flute, and Boehm system, I've seen some oboes. It doesn't work quite as well on oboe as the original French system. There's also a German system that's not used very much. And you see different oboes in Vienna too. But by and large, the French system is the one that's the most popular and used everywhere now. Now I do have two oboes. I have a Howarth, which is an interesting instrument. I would say it kind of favors the low register a little bit more. The Loré is a sort of lighter sounding instrument, and the upper register, the very high notes, are much easier on the Loré than they are on the Howarth. You know, they both have a place. The Howarth has a plastic top joint, which is very good for outdoor things because the wood often cracks on oboes. You have a lot of stress between the keys being put on the wood, a very small bore, and you're blowing moist, warm air into it, and it's dry on the outside, so they do tend to crack. So my oboe is also lined in the top joint, as is my English horn. The oboe d'amore, of course, is cracked through every single tone hole in the top joint except for one. So that's been inserted, and that's a very stable instrument now after all the work I had to have done on it. So they're very, not only do you have the reeds, you have all the finicky parts of the instrument. So we actually do, you know, we are craftsmen. When you really play oboe, you have the cane, which you buy by the pound, you split it, you cut it to length, then you soak it and gouge it, you plane it, then you shape it and you tie it into a reed, and only then do you have some idea whether it's actually going to work right or not. And there's a lot of variation in the cane, but the aperture and the entire reed is very small, so any variation is magnified, unlike the bigger reeds. Like English horn is slightly more forgiving, and oboe d'amore acoustically is its own animal. So they're all got their own ideas about how they want to play. And also the bore is slightly different in English horn and oboe d'amore. Oboe d'amore, it was a favorite of Bach. It blends really well with the voice, and it was experimented with a few composers in the 1800s. Like Symphonia Domestica has a full oboe d'amore part, and so does Bolero. The big oboe solo in Bolero is originally written for oboe d'amore, and that was really a student piece to show orchestration. So even though it became so incredibly popular, and English horn was considered an operatic, dramatic instrument. So it's used much more in opera in the 1800s before it came into its own in the really big orchestrations. So although Beethoven wrote 2 oboe trios for the Brothers Timer, and those were, the Opus 87's like a very small symphony for oboe trio, 2 oboes and English horn. And that's a wonderfully crafted piece. But there was another piece that was forgotten, which is variations on La Ci di Rem la Mano from Mozart's Magic Flute. And that was discovered in 1914 and has now come into standard repertoire for oboe trio. And that's a wonderful piece. I love playing that one too. So anyway, should I show you the different instruments?
You show us.
The you know, the Loré and the Howarth do sound differently, and they react a little differently. So I'm going to see if I can get my phone to behave and sit on the stand here, and we'll take out a reed that's and we'll start out with the Loré, which is a French instrument. So I don't know, can you see it? So it has a regular bell. It's cone shaped, right? So it's a very small aperture up here. I don't know what you can see, but the reed is very small. And oboe has a reputation for having the most pressure of any of the wind instruments at all. And we actually use the least amount of air. So you actually run out of oxygen before you run out of air. But we can also do something very tricky. So I'm going to see if you can identify something that I'm going to go do that's tricky. But I'm just going to play a couple notes and then I'll play a long solo. This is a Loré. And that's about the highest note that you really want to be around for, although we can play higher than that. Well, this reed doesn't want to do it, but you can put your teeth on the reed, but don't tell anybody. So I'm going to do something sneaky here for you, and I want to see if you can identify what I'm doing.
We're breaking up.
So we can actually breathe and play, and I'm sorry about my wrong note. You there?
Uh-oh.
It's called the phone
There she-
call, so
There you go.
I had to reject the phone call. So this is the other instrument. See if you can detect any difference in sound.
I think we're clipping on that. I think when you get to a certain volume, I think the phone is trying to protect other people's ears.
Oh, I'm
It
sorry.
really just cuts out.
That might be good. Everybody has an opinion. So these might fare better. We may have to edit this or whatever. Anyway, English horn. This is an English horn that was actually made for me. An English horn has the bulb on the end of it. You see that? And they originally did the bulb because it uses less wood. It is hollowed out inside. And the wood in the bell is from Costa Rica. I actually sent it to this instrument maker, Paul Laubin, years ago when I came back from Costa Rica. And he went out and bought, he didn't like the rest of the cocobolo wood that was in that shipment. And he went out and bought Brazilian. So it's slightly different color, but it's the same kind of wood. So this is English horn. Now, it's a longer instrument. Do you suppose it's higher or lower than oboe?
Lower.
Lower, yep. Let's see what to play. So William Tell,
Yep.
Symphony Fantastique, New World Symphony. So this instrument was made for me, which was very nice of him. And cocobolo is not easy to work with, in that the dust, some people are very allergic to the dust from it. So he does still work in cocobolo, but he does it outside with a respirator on. Had I known that, I would have never sent him any cocobolo wood. Anyway, here's an oboe d'amore, which is in between English horn and oboe. It's pitched in A, but again, it's a little different sounding. Let's see. So it's sort of sweeter, doesn't seem to have as much dynamic range, and but it's just wonderful for Bach. So those are the instruments that I play. So, anyway, should I tell you about some of the things I've had to play?
Okay.
And last week, actually it was on the 16th, I did a Chinese New Year celebration in New Jersey. That was the first live gig I've done like in a year. And it was at the American Dream Mall, and we were spaced out all over the place with kind of a skeleton orchestra. But that's always a lot of fun because we do some opera, and they always have really good singers. And then they have some of the Chinese instruments, and they had a Chinese artist there who plays a sonos, which is like a Chinese oboe, but you can do, has a really small reed. I would love to see it up close. It looks a little bit like an oboe, but he walks around with it, and he, of course, circular breeze like a genius, and can do all kinds of glissandi, and these pieces were written for him. So he's, it's very folksy, and the crowd always seems to go absolutely nuts for him. He just knows how to work the crowd. And then there are a couple other Chinese pieces that we play that are mixed meter, and it's a very interesting program. So I was glad that somebody decided to do something live instead of all the click track computer things that we've been doing this year. I hope that the music industry will recover at some point, and because I know my friends in the professional groups are really hurting. So hopefully people are practicing, and when we finally get this pandemic under control, we'll be all set to go. So most fulfilling experiences. I mean, you did write some questions for me. I did actually have the opportunity to play the Millennial Celebration from 1999 to 2000 on the Mall in Washington. And it was a live TV presentation, but we had to rehearse at the Kennedy Center. We actually did it outside at the Lincoln Memorial. And it was like 14 degrees on December 31st. And for when we were really playing the job itself, rather than rehearsing, the crowd was like jumping in the reflecting pool. I couldn't believe it. How crazy is that? But anyway, I did get to play with John Williams, and he came with actually a piece that he'd written for us, but he had already pre-recorded it. And he would really have rather done it live, but it was going to be outside and very cold, and it was with chorus. And of course, for the job, they put the chorus in front of us, so there wasn't any chance of actually seeing the conductor to be able to play together. So it was really good that he came with it pre-recorded, but we did play the rest of the pieces with Kathleen Battle and Jesse Norman, and they had Stomp there. Have you ever seen Stomp with the 55-gallon drums? Yeah. And they danced with those things on their feet up and down the marble steps there at the Lincoln Memorial. That was incredible. And, it was quite a celebration. I did manage to get my car towed that week because they were so paranoid about out of town cars being in the area, but it was very interesting. And then once we were done with the job and we were packing up, they never told us, that everybody was like very scared about security and everything. They never told us that they were going to be shooting out confetti over us, right? So they turn out all the lights, and then this confetti is shooting out over the orchestra. We had no idea what it was. So that was quite a shock. But that was a very interesting job. I did get paid very well, TV scale, that week. But, I've traveled all over the country with these different musical groups playing tours. And I'm so grateful I got to do that. And I got to do that before I had kids. Not that I wouldn't have, but I don't think I could have taken the kids with me. So I did wait quite a while to have my two wonderful sons. But I really love music, and it's a way to express your emotions and escape from things that's safe and productive and something you can really share with people. There's really nothing like sitting in a really good orchestra playing some of the really wonderful music for symphony orchestra that you get to play with and hear the people around you play and play with them in a way that it's very hard to do in any other venue. Maybe singing is like that, or you know, a really team sport, but you're competing against somebody else. You're not just doing it for the love of creating something. So
choral singing, where you've got to somehow make 200 people make one sound.
well, you know, David Randolph was very good at that in Carnegie Hall with Masterwork. I played with them once many years ago, and that was incredible. I always get a laugh out of playing in Carnegie Hall because the stage hands they don't want you even to move a chair or stand, just in case you want to move a little bit so you can see the conductor.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, there's so many wonderful places to play, and it's I hope that we can come back and there'll be a resurgence of classical music and all kinds of live events, including eating together and having friends around you and not being afraid of getting sick.
Yeah.
So
well,
anyway.
Yeah. I was going to say my first vaccine shot, March 12th.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I have my second one on Wednesday. I hope it's better than the first one.
Okay.
So,
Well, listen.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I was going to say.
Oh, Todd has some questions.
Good.
Oh, good. Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, Dorothy, wow. You know, I'm just so impressed. One, you know, that you love what you do is so clear, and also kind of inspiring in and of itself. But you know, it's amazing. You just kind of whipped off, oh yeah, and I got my doctorate here, and you know, I've been touring all over, and you had a real estate license. Were juggling that, and then you had a family. I mean, it's the fact that you've actually managed all of these things almost simultaneously is quite impressive, and really kind of it must speak to the passion you have for what you do. But have you thought about, how did I actually do this?
Yes, I now that I'm older, I look back and like, wow, how did I manage all of those things, you know? And there were moments, I mean, I will admit to you that, somebody who was a family member claimed that he was going to be home for the night, and then I did need to hire a babysitter for the rehearsal I was going to. And I would call the kids at 9:30 and they would say, nope, we haven't seen anybody. We're perfectly fine. Thank God my kids were good. I always fed them and made sure that they were taken care of. But, had the neighbors called in on me, it wouldn't have been a pretty picture, but, but, they're the most wonderful thing that happened to me, actually, my kids. I had them very late in life. I got very lucky. So
I also want to go back to like the start of your musical career, and even getting into Eastman School of Music. That's quite an accomplishment, but you made it sound as if you maybe weren't as prepared as you wanted to be, and then you just continued to soar as your career evolved. That seems kind of impressive.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I work hard and I've hung in there, and there have been ups and downs, but mostly I've just been very lucky. A lot of it's being very prepared and being in the right place. What can I say? I did have to take a number of auditions. A number of them I came very close in. Preparing for auditions is a completely different experience for me than anything else that I do. Because like if you do a concert, you know exactly what you're playing, you know what order you're playing it in. When you go for an audition, they ask the hardest things, and it can be in absolutely any order, and they can ask for it faster, slower, this or that. You know, it can be unsettling. So that can be, that's not my forte, but I did manage to win a number of them. It was funny because sometimes people come out after the audition in front of you and they say, oh, what was that piece? Blah, 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 blah. And then you, I mean, I knew what the piece was and I knew how it should go. And I was like, well, yeah, thank you for complaining. But oboe can be, you know, there have been auditions where I had to wait around a long, long time and I was incredibly nervous, and that doesn't help. And then there have been auditions where you had to stand in a cold hall and then you go and play and you have water in a key. And that doesn't go over very well because it's very easy on oboe to get water in a key because there's condensation. And especially if you're very warmed up and you've waited a long time, it's the perils of Pauline. But, you know, in a performance, you just do something about it. It just is what it is. But in an audition, it can really count against you. But
you touched on this a bit, talking about, you know, this incredible challenge that we're all facing with the pandemic, and especially how devastating it is for performers. And you said, you know, I hope everyone's practicing, but are there other thoughts about what you would, what you might say to your younger self, you know, I mean, during this time, as a recognizing how important it is to get through where we are right now?
Well, I find practicing really quite comforting, but, you know, it's sort of my recess from reality, if you know what I mean. But I'm trying to learn many new things, you know, computer things, you know, more about real estate. The market's right now picking up. So I'm rather glad I don't have too much music to do, because it can be, you can be really maxed out after a while, running around at night and then working during the day. Mm-hmm. So I am happy about that. I'm happy that we're getting closer to spring, and it'll be warmer out and a lot more fun to just walk around. I do a lot of walking these days. Mm-hmm. You know, the phone and Zoom, there's a lot of Zoom things going on, which is wonderful. And if I didn't have the phone, I think I'd go stark raving mad, because I have people that call up and talk for an hour at night. And, you know, I feel sometimes as if I'm a shrink, or sometimes they're my shrink. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But, now here's another sort of throwback question. When you think of the people you've met along the way and those who've mentored you, it could be an instructor, it could be actually a colleague, or even a friend. Do you want to share like a story about a mentor that had a particular impact on your life?
Well, I really, on a certain level, I really loved Robert Sprinkle. I thought he was just wonderful. It was funny because he was a Bloom student, but Bloom wasn't. Bloom had studied with Tabuteau. Tabuteau is sort of the godfather of the oboe school in America, right? And it has to do with reeds and sound production and teaching and everything. And he was quite difficult to study with, from what I hear. In fact, I think yesterday or today, Tabuteau, who was in Philly in the Philadelphia Orchestra and taught at Curtis, had a student named Lila Storch, and she just turned 100 just either today or yesterday or a couple days ago. And she's still playing a little bit. And she's had a long storied career, and knew all of the greats that Tabuteau had taught. And so that's really where the oboe school comes from. Now, Sprinkle had studied a little bit with Bloom, and also this gentleman named Arthur Foreman, who goes back to the original method that we use for oboe, which is called the Barrett Method. He had studied with Barrett at Covent Garden in England. And, you know, this goes back a really long way. But because of Howard Hanson, I probably shouldn't tell you the story, but Sprinkle wanted to go to Philly and study directly with Tabito. And Howard Hanson, who, you know, he was head of Eastman for a long, long time, said to Sprinkle, if you go and study with Tabito, you don't need to do that. You already know everything there is to know about the oboe. And it won't be good for your job if you do that. So talk about, I don't know, you know, provincialism.
Yeah.
That's what, but it was very funny because Sprinkle was in Lake Placid in the summers, and he would go down and he would spend some time with John Delancey, who had taken over the Philadelphia principal job from Tabito, and he would come back with ideas. But he also, one of the good things about studying with him is he always wanted us to go to all these music festivals and study with different teachers and come back and teach him whatever we'd learned, which was good for both of us.
Yeah.
And he was very analytical, much more analytical than any of my other teachers, very scientific mind. And I'll never forget, I went out to Aspen and I studied with Roseman one summer, and I came back with a slightly different reed style. And after a couple months, Sprinkle said to me, oh, the difference with this reed is that when you play softer, you get one sort of color in the sound. And then when you play louder, you get a different kind of color. And because of the way he scraped the reed, you can't shade it other than with the dynamics. And I thought that was so insightful. He was very incredibly analytical in that kind of a way.
Yeah.
So it really helped me. There were insights that I've had that I wish I could share with him. He's, you know, been gone quite a while, but he, you know, he taught there 40 years. He played in the Philharmonic for like maybe 49 years. And there was a real push to push them out of the orchestra if they were teaching at the school, because of course it was like a 60-hour week, but he resisted for a long time and eventually had to succumb to the Hanson push. At the very end. But anyway, yeah, he was wonderful. I mean, I studied a little bit with John Mack, and he was wonderful, but not enough to really. And then one of my real, the person that I really think is not honored enough is Richard Woodhams, who was the principal in the Philadelphia Orchestra and just retired recently for a long, long time, and is still teaching at Curtis. He is just he's my idea of what an oboe should sound like.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Thanks.
And I had the luxury of being at a music festival where he came out, this was years ago in Nebraska when he first got the job in Philly. And he had to play a couple solos for the orchestra, but the closest airport to Peru, Nebraska was Kansas City. So I had to drive to Kansas City and pick him up and take him back to the music festival. So I actually really got to know him. And then I had to take him back to the airport. So that was, you know, you have all these little things that happen that are funny in retrospect. So, and I have a friend who loves to go to the Curtis. They have one oboe recital at the end of the year, and I think they're going to do it on Zoom or something this year. We'd much rather go in person and have dinner and listen to the prospective students, because they're just, usually it's a wonderful concert. So anyway, so anybody want to buy a house?
We'll talk in a bit. Anyway, I don't know. So Dorothy, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation and some real insight into, you know, the nitty gritty of what you have to do. You know, there's that 100 people in the orchestra, and they're all doing stuff like what you're describing. You know, you've got reeds, you've got rosin for the string players, you've got all that. You know, everybody has their own set of challenges, and the result is magic.
Well, the other thing that to consider is we do everything electronically now. And a symphony orchestra, there's nothing electronic about it. We're doing hands-on,
Mhm.
Right.
unlike so much that's going on now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so even in an energy crisis, we could still play a concert as long as you have light. So
All right.
anyway, thank you so much for doing this. And I give you a high five. And, you know, it's so commendable, especially right now. I certainly hope I can help you somehow in the future.
Well, and likewise.
Sharing
Okay,
your stories is a huge help. Thank you.
right. Well, thank you
Thank
so much. Be well.
Yeah.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Well, after that conversation, we realized that there was something missing, which is an opportunity to hear Dorothy play. So here is one. It's a recording from 2015, and enjoy.